All right, hey everybody, welcome back to Passing Money. I'm Kurt Regis Alex. Today we just want to talk about for real estate investors about investing out of their home market, out of their local comfort zone. Just give an example. Here in Florida, the house prices are insanely high, and the tenants that are currently occupying those homes paying extremely low rent. So when you're not getting a good deal in your area, in your local area, we don't talk about things that we need to go through and processes you need to go through if you decide to leave your comfort zone and go, out of the area, out of state, or across country to invest in properties. With all that being said, let's get into it. Alex, let's do it.
All right, yeah. So both of us have been looking. I know you've actually closed on a deal up in a different state. Um, and I was looking as well, and especially me as someone who doesn't even have my first rental property yet is, I guess you could say, even more uncomfortable, but understanding the market, it's necessary to branch out and look elsewhere because, as you said, current rents that tenants are paying in Florida don't match up to what the listing prices are going for. And it's hard to find a good ROI on properties in Florida, if not impossible right now. So looking elsewhere just makes all the more sense to do as an investor, not even just a first time investor, but an investor in general. I mean, there's little to no ROI here in this market.
All right, so now with that, we're going to make two videos. Let's unpack why it's not investable in the Metro Tampa area, finding a good investment property in the Metro Tampa area. Let's unpack that part first, and then let's pivot to the other video that that we talked about at the start. But all right, so the Florida, I'm not gonna say all of Florida, but really it is all of Florida, but we're gonna talk about the Metro Tampa market, the Tampa, Lakeland, yada, 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 the things that surround that little halo of Metro Tampa area. The reason why it's not a good investment is because all the properties that are set up as rental properties that's for sale, they already have tenants inside. And the tenants are paying way below market rents. But the sellers are trying to sell the property as if the tenants are paying market rent. And I mean, I know some people don't know, but in Florida, if you're a tenant and you're on a year lease, the person who buys the property still have to honor that lease. Unless you come up with a deal with the tenant that, hey, you're going to cash for keys, you're going to give them some money so they can move out, and they agree to the deal in writing and things like that. But without that happening, you have to honor that lease. So if they're paying let's say they just started on a new year lease and they paying way below the market rate, and you're paying for the property like it's, the rates are at a market rate, you're cash flow negative, or you're paying out of your pocket for somebody to live in your property. All right, so that's one issue. The other issue is the seller, like I said, the seller at market rate saying, and you'll see it in the descriptions on the listing, they'll say, all right, well, the tenants are way below market rate, but if you get the rents up to market rate, then this is how much you'll make per month. So they paying like $600 a month. The market rate is like $1,800. There's two problems with that. One, if let's say the tenant lease ends tomorrow, right after the closing, you can't instantly jack it up from $600 to $1,800 on that exact tenant because they won't be able to afford it. So you can take two methods. You can slowly increase rates over time, but all the times that you bought at the market rate, you bought the property at market rate, if you slowly increase it over time, let's say 100, 200 bucks a year in rate increases, it's still going to take you 4 or 5 years to even get up to market rate. The other issue is, let's say the tenant lease ends today and we close on the property tomorrow, and the tenant wants to stay, but they can't afford the $1,800 a month in rent. So yes, you can tell the tenant that they have 30, 60 days to move out. But once that tenant move out, it's going to cost you more money to turn the property, which meaning paint the walls, not knowing how long the tenant's been there, and I'm not saying because they're paying only $600 a month, they're not taking good care of the place, because I have had a tenant that was paying way below market rent and the place was spotless. But the tenant could have been there for a long term of years in a natural wear and tear. So repainting the walls, getting the place up to snuff, and even bringing the decor or the finishes and stuff in the apartment and bringing it up to make it look like an $1,800 a month place. That's going to cost extra money out of your pocket on top of what you already paid for the property. So those are the two things, the big call outs on why the it's a problem paying market rate. I mean, paying for a rental that's advertised as below market rents, but they're selling it at like the rents are at market rate.
Yeah, and I mean, you and I have talked about this. It's important to know as a first-time investor how to determine your ROI and at what ROI, what minimum ROI should you be looking at, and ROI being return on investment for those that don't know. Um, and like I know one rule of thumb that we often talk about is like, you can get 8% on the S&P 500, so you should shoot for above that on a rental property. And
Right.
to see these properties, like you mentioned, where the tenants are long term, but they're old tenants paying under market rents, and the seller is listing the property at market rate. Like the one property we were speaking about earlier today, where it's a duplex, two tenants combined are paying $1,500 a month, and the property was listed for over $300,000. And going off of the commonly known 1% rule, where you should get where rent should be 1% of the sale value, that's what, 0.5%. So that's way below, and there's just no way to even make a deal on that. And I think it's important for first time investors to know, you're not just trying to buy a property and just say, hey, I got tenants in there. Like, you don't want to buy a property and you're paying for someone else to live there. And that's definitely key into getting into your first property. And it's something that, I know as I'm getting involved, but trying to, it's important to detach yourself from that emotional idea of, oh, this will be my first investment property, and just keep moving along until you can find a property that you can work into a deal that'll be good for you.
Right, and you've been looking. So how is it? Is it frustrating seeing these properties going for so high and the rents are so low?
Yeah.
It make you frustrated?
Yeah. I mean, especially because like the ideal thing would, or in my mind, I should say, um, and I mean, this is probably even just emotional, because my idea was like, it'd be cool to have my first rental property in my home state. Now, knowing that that's nearly impossible with this current market in the state that we're in. So I'm going to have to look beyond that. But the key is getting a deal on an investment. Doesn't matter if it's in your home state or in your neighborhood. What's important is that, are you getting an asset that is facts on facts considered an investment and will cash flow and bring you a return over the longevity of your lifetime and continue to appreciate, give you, tax depreciation, give you all the benefits that an investment should give you. And I think that's why I mentioned earlier is, it's important as a new investor to make sure that your first property is an investment, not just saying, oh, I have a house that I rent out. That anyone can probably just buy a house, or not anyone, let me rephrase that. But there are people that can buy a house and rent it out and say, oh, I have a tenant there. But is it an actual investment? And that's the key. Is if you're going to be a real estate investor, you have to go into it as an investment.
And if you go back to the '08 financial crisis, there was a lot of people that was finance or renting homes that was cash flow negative or breaking even. The tenants were just paying the mortgage for the place, but that's a recipe for disaster. Or you're paying for the tenant to live there, and And the reason why these, and then so somebody might have the question is, well, if you know that the prices are too high, shouldn't the seller know that? And the dynamic is the sellers right now, we had the big run up in 2020, 2021. And these sellers that's putting their properties up for sale, they want to catch that last grass of people paying exorbitant amounts of money for properties. So they want to get that extended price. But if they want to get that price, they should do the work. And what I mean by do the work is get the revenues higher for the property, raise the rent on the tenant. And a lot of people, there's a lot of mom and pop investors that's putting their house up for sale, and they've built good relationship with the tenants, so they feel bad about raising the rent on the tenants. So instead of them raising the rent on the tenants, they just figure they can find somebody that's a sucker that will pay this exorbitant amount, and then they can deal with raising the rent on the tenant. But if you want that, and I'm speaking to sellers and seller agents out there, if you want that max price for the property, get the revenues up to make it at least 1%. So if you're selling a house for 300,000, a rental property, $300,000, get the rents up to at least 28 to $3,000 a month for each side. And then somebody will happily pay that price. But when you got rents at $600 and the rent should be $1,500, that's a lot of work and a big pill to swallow. But back in 2020 and 2021, people was buying those properties because you was getting a low interest rate. But now the interest rate is up to 5-6%. So it's double from where it was at in 2020, 2021. But people still trying to catch the top of the market on those houses, and now you see them sitting longer on the market, and now you're seeing price cuts, price cuts, price cuts, because the deal doesn't make sense for the buyer.
Right. And I want to add on to that too, because like, um, like we were talking the other day where I was looking at properties in, one specific town up in Georgia. And, um, I'm looking at like maybe in this town, like between 5 to 10 properties. And I was just like, it was frustrating because it was like the seller would just not work. Like none of the sellers would just not work with you on, or work with me, I should say, on making it right. Just like you were saying, like the seller's way off from what the buyer's looking for. But you can't get tunnel vision either, I should say, as a new investor, because you were like, dude, there's a town right above and here's a perfect deal. And like, so then just like expanding your vision into looking into other nearby areas, looking around the corner is I would say is also important. Just like you had said, you're looking at probably 100 or more properties per day. And if there are, being that there are sellers on the market that could be difficult to work with, that doesn't mean that every seller is going to be difficult to work with. And you just have
Right.
to keep working at it until you find the right deal.